Have you ever wondered what would happen if the head of a huge company walked its corridors unnoticed? Imagine a powerful black female CEO, revered throughout the business world, arriving at her own company in disguise, just to see what happens when nobody knows who she is. The day begins like any other. Employees rushing to their desks, managers delivering orders. But one manager, blinded by arrogance, crosses a line. He threatens to fire this unassuming new hire. And then everything changes in a heartbeat when he realizes her name is emblazoned on the wall as the company's founder and CEO. Renee Hawthorne never forgot what it felt like to stand in her mother's living room, battered by other people's judgments, whether about her skin color, her gender, or her humble upbringing. She remembered the nights her mother worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table in their small two-bedroom apartment in the South Bronx. She recalled the smirk on her high school counselor's face when she mentioned her dream of going to Harvard Business School, as if the very suggestion was comedic. These memories fueled her grit, determination, and unwavering pride in her identity. Now she was the CEO of an expansive technology solutions firm, Avalon Technologies, a Fortune 500 star that had begun, humbly, in a shared co-working space with only 4 employees. Through fearless innovation and relentless attention to quality, Renee built the company from an underfunded start up to a global presence. She had become a legend in the business world, her image appearing on the cover of Forbes and her name regularly headlining panel discussions on leadership. Avalon Technologies boasted a staff of over 10,000 employees, stationed at offices around the world. Its headquarters, located in a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Chicago, stood as a testament to possibility realized. Yet, recent rumors reached Renee's ears. Rumored discrimination and shady tactics in the mid-level management ranks. Talk of certain department heads who had become intoxicated by power, especially in the human resources and operations divisions. These rumors came from employees who were too afraid to file official complaints, fearful that their managers would retaliate. The official channels seemed clogged with gatekeeping. As a woman and a black woman who had clawed her way to the top, Renee felt a personal calling to fix any hint of systemic injustice under her watch. Her entire reason for founding Avalon had been to show that diverse perspectives and inclusive approaches could revolutionize not only technology, but the entire landscape of corporate culture. She wanted to see it for herself unfiltered. She needed truth, raw and unscripted. With her board of directors generally trusting her vision, she had the freedom to orchestrate unusual strategies. So when she decided to go undercover and experience her own company from a ground-level vantage point, no one on the board dared object. After all, who could argue with the woman whose name was etched in every major corridor? On a crisp Monday morning, Renee found herself stepping off a public bus 2 blocks from Avalon's headquarters, opting to skip her usual chauffeur-driven car, security detail, and personal assistant. She'd altered her hair, exchanged her elegant tailored suits for the humble business casual attire that a temp worker or new trainee might wear. She had placed tinted reading glasses on her face, which partially obscured her identity. Even the building's receptionist wouldn't recognize her. Over the past few years, she had let her hair grow out in distinct, beautiful curls that she typically wore pinned back in a professional updo. Today, she had them braided and tucked under a modest wig of short, straight hair that gave her a drastically different look. All her polished diamond studs and name-brand accessories were replaced by understated costume jewelry. As she approached the towering glass facade, she felt a swirl of excitement and nerves. The corporate mantra she had instituted ran across a digital ticker mounted on the building's outer wall in bold letters: innovation, diversity, integrity. She paused, gazing up at it, and felt a pang of responsibility. Were those values truly being honored behind closed doors? She was about to find out. Before she stepped inside, Renee recalled the early days of Avalon Technologies. She had formed the company alongside three close friends, two from her Harvard Business School cohort and one from the University of Illinois. Their initial plan was to revolutionize big data analytics for small and medium businesses, allowing them to harness predictive analytics without paying exorbitant costs that only massive corporations could afford. That early product took off, growing from a single pilot project into a full-scale platform used by banks, e-commerce platforms, and healthcare providers. With success came investment capital, expansions, and the inevitable risk of losing the small, family-like environment. Avalon grew at times too quickly. Renee worked hard to maintain the sense of mission that had guided them since the beginning. She started an inclusive hiring program, championing the notion that diversity in thought, race, gender, and background was not just about representation, but about the synergy needed for true innovation. She had personally funded STEM scholarships for underrepresented communities, forging partnerships with local schools and community colleges. The walls in the main lobby now displayed posters of smiling students from these scholarship programs who later landed positions at Avalon. However, rumor had it that certain managers, especially those hired later as the company ballooned in size, had different values. Perhaps they saw employees more as chess pieces than as valued contributors. Rumors of micromanaging, belittling remarks, and questionable hiring or firing practices began to swirl. There were even allegations that employees who spoke with an accent, or who were from marginalized backgrounds, found themselves marginalized in promotions. Renee, unsatisfied with trickle-down reports from the upper echelons, wanted to see the day-to-day reality. If her vision for inclusive leadership was compromised, she wanted to root out the cause at its source. She hoped it was just a handful of bad eggs, but if the problem proved deeper, she was prepared to do whatever was necessary to protect the spirit of Avalon. As she entered the building's vast lobby, she felt the hush of polished floors and climate-controlled air. The security station in the middle of the lobby was manned by a guard who did not glance up at her. A line of new hires and visitors waited to sign in on digital kiosks. Renee joined them, nerves thrumming. She glimpsed a plaque listing Avalon key executives on the far wall. There, near the top, was her own name in bold letters, Renee Hawthorne, founder and CEO. She proceeded to the kiosk, typed in a generic name, Claire Brown, which was the temporary ID the HR lead had set up at her request. Only the minimal number of top-level executives had authorized this infiltration, but they had not asked her to explain exactly how she would implement it. She simply had to sign some specialized NDAs and confirm that legal coverage was in place. Everything was set. She pressed enter. The kiosk processed, printing out a bright red visitor badge with the name Claire Brown. The next step required her to proceed to the 20th floor for orientation. Avalon's orientation process was streamlined, usually featuring a comprehensive introduction to the company's vision and operations. She had designed much of it herself, or at least signed off on it. She always wanted new people to feel welcomed, to sense that Avalon was not just a job, but a place of belonging. With her visitor's badge pinned to her collar, she slid into an elevator. A small group joined her, each wearing a different color-coded lanyard that indicated their department. The ride was silent, except for a brief exchange between two employees regarding a lunch meeting. Renee's heart pounded. She had never been just another face in her own company. For years, people parted like the Red Sea when she walked the halls, greeting her with smiles and anxious nods. Now she was invisible. She wondered if her mother, who had passed a few years ago, was watching her at this very moment, proud of her audacity. The elevator dinged at the 20th floor, opening onto a modern reception area with minimalistic decor and glass partitions. A woman with a welcoming smile behind the desk checked each new arrival, verifying names on a screen. She asked for Claire Brown, and Renee stepped forward. The woman's grin never faltered. "Welcome to Avalon Technologies," she said. "I'm Miranda. We'll be starting orientation in about 10 minutes in conference room B. Please help yourself to coffee and refreshments in the lounge." Renee thanked her and moved to the lounge area. She was alone with her thoughts for a moment, scanning the open plan design. She recognized the artwork on the walls, large canvases celebrating diversity. She recalled commissioning local artists to depict the city's mosaic of cultures. She felt a surge of pride and prayed that the culture she championed was genuinely practiced, not just displayed. Within moments, a small group of about 7 new hires had clustered in the lounge. They introduced themselves to each other, exchanging backgrounds. One was an IT specialist from Detroit, one was a marketing coordinator from Atlanta, and one was a financial analyst from Hong Kong. Renee noticed, with pleasure, the variety of skill sets and nationalities. At least on paper, Avalon still walked the diversity talk. Eventually, they were guided into conference room B, where orientation officially began. The standard slideshow lit up the screen. "Welcome to Avalon Technologies Building Tomorrow, Today." For the first time in her life, Renee took a seat among new hires at her own company and prepared to hear what she had only observed from a distance. Orientation began innocuously enough. A mid-level HR associate named Thomas introduced himself. He was young and exuded a corporate enthusiasm. He wore a crisp button-down shirt, his hair slicked to the side. He started by explaining Avalon's mission: to harness technology to empower businesses of all sizes and backgrounds. He highlighted that Avalon prided itself on its progressive policies, generous maternity and paternity leaves, flexible scheduling, and a commitment to fair employment practices. At times, Thomas seemed rushed, presumably because orientation was typically more thorough, but perhaps he had a busy schedule. While the slides flickered through benefits and the corporate history, Renee glanced around the room. Most of her fellow new hires scribbled notes. Some asked questions about health insurance, 401k matches, or remote work possibilities. Renee felt a sense of gratification. She had fought for these benefits, especially the family-friendly policies. She had insisted that Avalon match or exceed the best in the industry, because she knew how crucial support systems were for individuals from all walks of life. However, as the session progressed, there were subtle signs that something might be off. A question about potential mentorship programs for minority employees seemed to momentarily fluster Thomas. He flipped through a few slides, eventually muttering that such special programs weren't needed because Avalon was already colorblind. Renee sat up straighter at that phrasing. She knew from countless DEI seminars that the word colorblind often dismissed the complexities of diversity rather than celebrating them. To be fair, it might have been ignorance or a slip of the tongue, but it was a small indicator that some of Avalon's staff might not fully comprehend its inclusive ethos. When orientation ended, the new hires were split by department. Renee was nominally assigned to a hybrid role assisting both administration and data entry. She had chosen a lower-level position so she could float between departments more freely, observe manager-employee interactions, and not draw suspicion. Thomas introduced her to a manager named Brian Cutter, who would be her immediate supervisor for training. Brian was tall, with an impeccably ironed shirt and meticulously combed hair. The handshake he offered was tight, brimming with overconfidence. He looked Renee over quickly, and she noticed a flicker of disdain or superiority in his gaze, but she couldn't be sure. She followed him down a hallway lined with motivational posters that displayed slogans like "Teamwork makes the dream work." Some were even quotes from famous entrepreneurs, including one from her own Harvard Business School speech. "True leadership is not about commanding, it's about empowering." That line was etched in her memory, having come from her own experiences of rarely being empowered by those in authority when she was younger. They arrived at a small cubicle farm near the windows. Brian gestured to a cramped desk on the far side. "That's your spot," he said brusquely. "Don't get too comfortable. You'll be moved around a bit until we decide if you're a good fit." Renee nodded, feigning timid enthusiasm. Thank you. I look forward to learning everything I can about the company. Brian forced a smile, then turned and left, offering no further guidance. Renee settled into the desk, booted up the computer, and tried to orient herself. She already knew the system inside and out, obviously, but she needed to act as though she didn't. She poked around, occasionally letting out a puzzled hum or a thoughtful ah. She was waiting to see if Brian or anyone would volunteer to help the new hire. Half an hour later, no one had approached her. Glancing around, she saw other employees in the row tapping away at their keyboards, eyes glued to their monitors. A sense of tension hung in the air, as if everyone was walking on eggshells. Occasionally, Brian would pass, his eyes scanning the cubicles. Each time, employees seemed to stiffen, as though terrified of attracting his attention. This was not the environment she had envisioned for Avalon. Where was the collaboration, the open exchange of ideas, the sense of belonging? Her heart sank. At lunchtime, Renee left her cubicle, intending to explore the office more thoroughly. She went to the cafeteria on the 12th floor, a modern space with wide windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Employees lined up at the salad bar, the sandwich station, or the hot meal station. As she grabbed a tray, she overheard two staffers quietly whispering about an HR fiasco last week. She pretended not to notice, but her ears perked up. Words like unfair dismissal and hostile environment floated through the air before the conversation dropped back into hushed tones. Her suspicions were confirmed. Something was definitely amiss in her kingdom. The question was how wide it spread and how high it went. Just as she found a seat by a window, a shy woman from orientation named Janelle approached and asked to join her. Janelle had also been assigned to the same administrative area. She was a soft-spoken woman in her mid-20s, originally from a small town in Alabama, now eager to make her mark in the big city. They exchanged small talk before Janelle confided, "I'm a bit concerned. Brian's, well, he doesn't really like to answer questions, and he's always giving me these condescending looks." Renee, remembering her own interactions, nodded. "Maybe it's just his management style," she offered, playing devil's advocate. But inside she bristled. Janelle frowned. "I don't know. I mean, everyone I spoke to said Avalon was one of the best places to work for women and for people of color. But from the minute I introduced myself, I sensed tension." Her words trailed off, and she shrugged, as if frightened that complaining too loudly might cost her this job. That moment reaffirmed to Renee just how critical her undercover mission was. If employees were too intimidated to raise valid concerns, the chain of command was broken. Leadership was failing. After lunch, Renee returned to her desk. Brian was waiting for her, arms folded. She had not expected him there. Immediately, he began to question her about her break. "Your lunch hour ended 10 minutes ago," he scolded. "You're new here, so let me give you a tip. People who dawdle don't last long." He walked away before she could respond. Anger flared inside her. She had arrived back in precisely 60 minutes, the standard lunch break. She double-checked the time on her phone. She'd only been gone an hour, yet he was inventing an accusation to maintain control. She also noticed he'd used that phrase, "people who dawdle don't last long," as if it was a threat. He wanted fear in the workplace. Slowly, she took a seat, her mind whirling. Yes, it seemed one or two mid-level managers were causing issues. But could the infection spread beyond this small department? The question haunted her. She vowed to investigate further, to see how high up the rot went and to stop it, once and for all. Day one, as Claire Brown concluded without fanfare, Renee found no warm welcome or supportive manager to guide her. Instead, she witnessed a stifling atmosphere in which Brian's presence caused everyone to tighten up. Some employees whispered that the turnover in the department was high. A few, who recognized she was new, told her to keep her head down if she wanted to survive. It was a discouraging revelation that reeked of everything she had fought against her entire career. Over the next few days, Renee walked a delicate line between appearing curious as a new hire should and maintaining a low profile. She listened keenly to others' frustrations. Janelle offered frequent updates. Brian wants me to skip my break again. Or, he made a joke about my accent. Once, Janelle was so upset, she confided that her mother was ill, and she had asked about Avalon's compassionate leave policy. Brian, according to Janelle, had laughed, saying, "This isn't a charity, it's a company that expects results." Renee gripped her desk, fighting the urge to reveal her identity and set things right immediately. But she needed more than just hearsay. She wanted undeniable proof. Too often, bad managers managed to wiggle out of accountability by claiming ignorance or twisting the narrative. She wanted a thorough picture: how many people had lodged complaints, how many found them ignored, how many left the company because of toxic leadership. She would gather the evidence needed to make an example of those who tarnished Avalon's culture. During a coffee break, she took the elevator up to the 25th floor, the corridor that housed executive offices, including her own. She told the front desk assistant, a friendly individual named Noah, that she was delivering documents from Brian's department. Noah hardly looked up and simply gestured toward a table used for incoming mail and deliveries. Renee placed the blank envelope there, but her true motive lay elsewhere. She scanned the hallway, glimpsed the large frosted glass doors leading to her corner office suite, and felt a pang of longing. She missed the vantage point from which she had once freely strolled, but her name on the door was a liability now, so she kept her head low. She then stopped by the HR department on the 26th floor, stepping gingerly inside. A harried HR representative named Lakshmi was talking with another colleague, whispering about a potential lawsuit from a former employee claiming discrimination. Renee heard only fragments mention of a manager who had made racially charged remarks. The conversation ended abruptly when Lakshmi noticed Claire in the doorway. Quickly adopting her best new employee smile, Renee claimed she was lost. Lakshmi gave her directions back to the elevator, a polite but dismissive courtesy. She left with her suspicions intensified. There was something going on at HR, and Brian might not be the only manager involved. That same afternoon, another new hire, a data analyst named Ricardo, approached Janelle and Renee, looking anxious. "Hey, did you two also get asked for a second background check?" he asked. They exchanged puzzled looks. "Brian's assistant just emailed me that I have to provide more personal data. They said it's standard procedure, but it's weird. I already did that in orientation." Renee frowned. Avalon had rigorous but fair hiring processes, yet they rarely demanded second background checks unless something flagged. She asked, "Did they say why they need it?" feigning curiosity. Ricardo shrugged. "No, just that it's routine. But it's a lot of info they want. Previous addresses, references, financial statements. It's invasive." Renee's stomach churned. This sounded like intimidation, or possibly targeted harassment, especially if done to specific employees, perhaps those Brian or someone else didn't like. She told him calmly, "I'd just keep a record of everything. Save all your emails, forward them to a personal account." He nodded, relieved for the advice. Janelle met Renee's eyes, as though silently agreeing that something about this place was not right. As the week ended, an oppressive gloom settled over the floor. Tension bled into daily tasks, with employees fussing over every detail, hoping to avoid Brian's wrath. Renee tried to speak to him about her own tasks, but he consistently brushed her off, telling her, "Don't ask unnecessary questions." She also noticed that he singled out certain employees for criticism, those who were female, those who had accents, and those who were obviously from diverse backgrounds. He'd occasionally mutter under his breath, "I don't know where they find these people," or "We need employees who can actually keep up, not slow us down." He almost never aimed his sneering remarks at the younger, white male hires. They seemed to glide under his radar with minimal scrutiny. Renee grew incensed. She had not built a multi-billion-dollar corporation to let it become a breeding ground for prejudice. Her anger boiled when she recalled her own struggles as a young, black female entrepreneur, how she had sworn to create a haven where merit, passion, and innovation trumped biases. Now it appeared that vision was being hijacked under her nose. Still, she maintained composure, diligently documenting each instance of wrongdoing in a small notebook she kept tucked away in her handbag. Every time she observed Brian belittle someone or intimidate them with vague threats, she wrote it down: date, time, place, exact words if possible. She planned to gather enough data to confront not only Brian, but any superiors who might have turned a blind eye. But destiny had a flair for drama, and it wouldn't wait for her plan to fully unfold. One fateful Monday morning, events would escalate beyond her control in a confrontation that would bring her mission and her true identity into the harsh light of day. The confrontation began like many corporate meltdowns do, over something small. On Monday morning, the staff were hustling about, preparing for a quarterly progress meeting with an upper-level executive rumored to be arriving soon. Everyone was nervous, especially under Brian's watchful eye. The tension crackled with the static of corporate pressure. Renee arrived a few minutes early, finding her desk littered with a stack of spreadsheets that Brian had apparently dropped off. A sticky note on top bore his curt scrawl: "Need these finished by 10. No excuses." It was already 9:05. She frowned. The assignment was doable, but tight, especially for a new hire who supposedly was not yet fully trained, but she had the skill to complete it. She drew on her intimate knowledge of the system's database and analytics software. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She cross-referenced columns, corrected erroneous formulas, sorted data sets as needed, and pulled up the corresponding charts. By 9:50, she was finished. The rest of the floor was abuzz with frantic employees, each trying to finalize their own tasks for the impending executive review. At 9:55, Brian strode over, eyebrows raised. "Are you done yet?" he barked. Renee nodded, pointing to the electronic folder on the shared drive. "Yes, I've uploaded it." Brian froze. A shadow of surprise flickered across his face. It almost looked as though he expected her to fail. Without a word of thanks, he stormed off to examine the files at his own computer. A minute later, he returned with a single line red penned on a printout. "This chart doesn't look right," he said. "Fix it now." He tossed the paper at her desk. Renee stared at the line. She recognized it. A glitch in the raw data that had come from another department's input. She had flagged it, but the system had automatically adjusted. The chart was technically correct. She glanced up, about to explain, but Brian cut her off. "When I say it's not right, it's not right. Understand?" Clenching her jaw, she acquiesced. "I'll look at it." She returned to her computer, located the line, and manually adjusted the input to reflect a figure that might appease him. Even though it was data tampering, she reminded herself she couldn't blow her cover over one chart. But the next moment was the tipping point. Janelle, who had approached Brian at the adjacent desk, tried to hand him some documents. "Sir, I have the staff attendance logs you asked for," she said meekly. Without turning, Brian snapped, "Not now. Can't you see I'm busy dealing with incompetent hires?" He jabbed his finger in Renee's direction. Janelle visibly trembled, then whispered, I'm sorry. Before she could finish, Brian whirled, hissing in a low voice, "You keep making these mistakes, you and the rest of the incompetent lot. Mark my words, I'll see you gone within a week if you don't shape up." That's not a threat, that's a promise. The entire office had grown eerily silent, heads swiveled to watch. Janelle's face crumpled, tears threatening to spill. Renee's restraint finally snapped. She rose from her chair. "Brian, that's completely out of line," she said, her voice trembling with anger. She had seen him bully others before, but never so blatantly and cruelly. She's just doing her job. There's no need to humiliate her. Brian's eyes narrowed in on Renee, who had the audacity to stand up for a coworker. He glared, Who do you think you are, little temp, telling me how to run this department? Let me make something crystal clear. I'm the manager. You're the replaceable grunt. If you don't like it, the door's that way. He pointed toward the hallway exit. Some employees gasped. Brian had never threatened someone so publicly. Janelle stood frozen, eyes wide. In that moment, a wave of adrenaline crashed over Renee. She realized that if she kept silent, she would be betraying her own principles, and she hadn't built Avalon for that. She squared her shoulders. In any professional environment, treating people with respect is key, she said, words carefully measured. That's what Avalon stands for. Brian smirked, stepping forward, his face inches from hers. You've got a lot of nerve. Are you quoting the mission statement at me now? Let me guess you think just because the company touts diversity, that you can do whatever you want. Did you think you'd have special privileges or something? The racially charged undertone in his words was blatant. The color drained from Janelle's face. Others stared, mortified. Renee's stomach twisted. It was time to drop the act, or at least let him know he was out of line. That's not how Avalon operates, she repeated, her voice steady. I know this company better than you think. Oh, do you? Are you some kind of insider? He sneered, his tone dripping scorn. Let me guess, you read too many self-help books about empowerment. Newsflash. In the real world, subordinates follow orders. If you can't handle it, then get out. You're fired. He practically spat the final words, as if relishing the power. A wave of disbelief swept the floor. People murmured among themselves. A few even quietly tried to speak up for Claire, but Brian shot them a glare that silenced them. Renee's heart pounded. She knew she had come to gather evidence and handle this discreetly, but she could no longer stand by. This man was a malignant presence in her own company. The unstoppable wave of truth she had repressed rose up. Fired? You think you have the authority to do that? She asked, calmly, her eyes holding his. He snarled, I have every authority here. The big boss isn't here. I run this floor. And as of now, you're gone. Security will escort you out. The tension was absolute. Employees stood up in their cubicles, eyes wide. No one had ever seen Brian so openly vindictive. Even those who loathed him were terrified to speak. But in that hush, from a corner cubicle, someone's phone began to ring. It echoed in the silence, like a siren. Renee breathed deeply. If she was going to reveal herself, it had to be decisive. She reached into her handbag, pulled out her ID past the original, the one that bore her real name, Renee Hawthorne, founder and CEO, Avalon Technologies. She held it up for Brian and everyone else to see. His face blanched at the sight of the official credentials, with the gold embossed lettering. A hush fell heavier than before. A wave of recognition flickered through employees who had seen her photos in the news or in the building's own media. They realized who was standing before them, who Brian had been belittling. Jaws dropped. Some literally gasped. A few, overwhelmed by the shock, backed away as if the very air around them had changed. Renee, tears of anger threatening at the corners of her eyes, looked straight at Brian. You said I'm fired? She asked, her voice a low tremor. Well, let me tell you who actually has the power here. For a long, excruciating moment, Brian was struck speechless. His eyes darted from the ID badge in Renee's hand to her face, then to the trembling onlookers. He looked for some sort of rescue, perhaps, from security or a higher-up. But he was the manager who had created this public spectacle. Renee felt her heart hammering in her chest. This wasn't exactly how she'd planned to expose the truth, but destiny had pushed her to the brink. She let the hush linger, letting Brian and everyone else grapple with the magnitude of the situation. At last, Brian found his voice. It came out as a shaky attempt at denial. This is some kind of joke, he stammered, but the cracks in his bravado were evident. You can't be, Janelle, eyes wet with tears, stepped forward, her voice trembling with awe. She's the CEO, she whispered. She's on the wall in the main lobby. Her picture is there. Janelle glanced around desperately, seeking confirmation. Others nodded in silent agreement. They had seen the large plaque listing the key executives. They had seen photos in the official newsletters. The resemblance was now obvious, especially as they recalled news articles featuring the dynamic, curly-haired entrepreneur. The disguise had been subtle but effective enough, especially since few employees expected their CEO to walk among them. Brian, face ashen, clutched the corner of a cubicle as though he might collapse. He looked at his watch, as if hoping the moment would vanish. But time refused to budge. He was stuck. He had revealed his worst traits in front of the one person in the company who truly mattered. Renee inhaled slowly, then addressed the entire floor. I've been undercover here as a new hire named Claire Brown to investigate allegations of misconduct. I wanted to see firsthand how employees were treated, how managers upheld or ignored our values. Our mission statement calls for innovation, diversity, and integrity. That's what Avalon stands for. But what I've witnessed here is bullying, discrimination, and intimidation. And it stops now. Some employees exchanged stunned glances. Others looked utterly relieved, as if a savior had appeared in the midst of a nightmare. Janelle clasped her hands over her mouth in gratitude, tears slipping down her cheeks. Ricardo looked equally thunderstruck, blinking as though this was the last thing he expected on a Monday morning. Renee turned her focus to Brian, who stood trembling, his earlier bravado utterly gone. She stepped closer, scanning him with a long, critical gaze. Brian Cutter, you have systematically created a hostile work environment in direct violation of Avalon's policies and the values I founded this company upon. The evidence I've gathered and the testimony of employees shows this is not an isolated incident. You have been given a position of trust, but you've betrayed it. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but no words came. He was cornered, and everyone knew it. His eyes flickered with panic as he realized the severity of his predicament. Renee continued, you threatened to fire me, a person you believed was simply a low-level employee, for standing up to your bullying. That alone is cause for immediate termination. And your remarks about incompetent hires and ridiculing people's backgrounds, that goes beyond professional misconduct. That's borderline harassment and discrimination. A hush fell, except for the distant hum of computers. Employees stared, hearts pounding. Some realized they might be called upon to corroborate these truths, but none seemed reluctant to do so. The tension that had hung over the office for so long lifted, replaced by a charged readiness for justice. Brian's face crumpled as the true force of retribution descended. Please, he sputtered. Let's not blow this out of proportion. I was trying to meet deadlines, keep the department running. It's a tough environment, you know. We all get stressed. Renee shook her head. Stress does not excuse harassment or prejudice. Stress does not excuse humiliating employees in front of their peers, or threatening to fire them over trivial matters. And it certainly doesn't excuse your repeated condescension toward women and people of color. I've seen and heard it all week. You even demanded altering data to suit your narrative. That is not how Avalon operates. Brian's shoulders sagged as he realized how far he had fallen. He shot a desperate look at the onlookers, silently begging for someone to defend him, but no one spoke. His reign of terror had ensured that he had no allies left. Renee nodded once, a tight, final gesture. Brian, as of this moment, you are relieved of all duties. Security will escort you out. Her tone didn't waver. She pressed a button on her phone, calling building security. It was only a short time before 2 guards arrived, each wearing Avalon's uniform. They had no idea about the drama that had just transpired, but they recognized the CEO and silently waited for her instructions. Renee pointed to Brian, who looked pale as a ghost. He's no longer an employee of this company. Gather his badge and make sure he collects only his personal belongings. Escort him off the premises. The guards complied. Brian began babbling pleas. but the guards gently guided him away. A stunned hush lingered even after the elevator doors sealed shut behind Brian's trembling figure. In that silence, people realized a new era was dawning. A wave of disbelief still lingered in the aftermath. Workers remained at their desks, as though uncertain whether they should continue working or step forward to address their newly revealed CEO. Janelle, tears finally drying, approached with trembling hands. She managed a timid smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was so scared he'd fire me, and that I'd have no job." Renee gave her a soft, reassuring nod. "No one should have to live in fear at Avalon. We're here to provide opportunity, to celebrate potential. That was my vision from day one, and it still is." She could see relief flooding Janelle's features, a mixture of gratitude and awe. One by one, other employees approached, sharing their own experiences of Brian's harshness. Some had endured sabotage, extra background checks, or threatened write-ups for minor infractions. Others described how their colleagues, those who had found the environment unbearable, had quietly resigned, never filing official complaints, because they believed no one would listen. Renee felt a profound sadness, tempered by a fierce resolve. This was not what she had built Avalon to be. While she had taken immediate action against one manager, she knew the problem might go deeper. She needed to conduct a sweeping review of all mid-level leadership. The rot could be more widespread than just Brian. She also knew she had to step out of her undercover persona now. She'd come here to gather intel quietly, but the cat was out of the bag in a dramatic flourish. Ironically, she felt relief at the unmasking. She was eager to reconnect with the people as their CEO, not as a powerless new hire, but there was so much work to be done. After ensuring Janelle and several others were okay, she walked to the center of the open floor, calling everyone's attention. "I want to apologize," she began, voice strong yet tinged with sorrow. "I apologize that our corporate structure failed to catch this toxicity sooner. This is precisely the opposite of Avalon's mission. Starting today, I'm implementing a thorough investigation into workplace culture across all departments. We will be listening to each of you. We will create safe channels for grievances. If any of you have had experiences similar to what we witnessed from Brian, please come forward. We will fix this." A few employees applauded timidly. Some nodded, tears in their eyes. Others looked uncertain, perhaps suspicious of whether real change would follow. Renee felt the weight of their skepticism. She had to show them, through action, that she was serious. Over the next hour, she assembled the newly hired group, those she had gone through orientation with, and apologized for any shock or disruption. She revealed that her infiltration was driven by repeated rumors of unfair treatment. She reaffirmed her commitment to standing up for them, to living up to Avalon's stated values. She welcomed them to the company in a heartfelt manner that they should have received on day one. It was a far cry from the hush-hush orientation session they had actually experienced. One of the new hires, the data analyst Ricardo, approached with wide eyes. I never expected I'd be having a conversation with the CEO on my first week," he said, a tremble in his voice. "I'm sorry if we ever acted less than respectful." Renee gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You have nothing to be sorry for. My role is to ensure a healthy environment for all employees, from day one to day 1001. She paused. "Ricardo, the first recall you had concerns about a second background check. You're not alone in that. I suspect it was part of Brian's intimidation tactics. I'll make sure such requests stop immediately." She then urged them to return to their stations, promising that a formal meeting with the HR team and top executives would follow soon. After the crowd dispersed, she slipped into a private office to make a flurry of calls. She had to summon the upper-level managers of HR, as well as the directors and VPs, who had direct oversight of the administration department. A thorough housecleaning was long overdue. Each call revealed fresh layers of concern. HR had a backlog of complaints that never reached the executive suite, because certain mid-level gatekeepers suppressed or misfiled them. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. Brian had been part of a small circle of managers who circumvented Avalon's best practices for personal gain or due to ignorant prejudices. She set up an emergency meeting for that very afternoon. Before heading to the meeting, though, she decided to take a moment to walk through the building's main lobby. She stood before the plaque with the big gold letters that spelled out her own name, Renee Hawthorne, founder and CEO. Next to it, a quote, "The future belongs to those who see everyone's potential." She remembered the day they'd installed that plaque, the sense of triumph and pride. Now it stung to realize that while her name and words were revered in public, corners of the company had rotted beneath them. She clenched her fists and whispered, "It's time to restore what this place should be." By mid-afternoon, a group of stunned executives gathered in the large conference room. The blinds were drawn, and the tension was palpable. Each participant had been informed that the CEO had uncovered serious violations of Avalon's core principles and had demanded their immediate presence. Among them were the VP of Operations, the head of HR, a handful of department directors, and the corporate counsel. Renee entered the room and closed the door behind her. She surveyed each face. Some she trusted wholeheartedly, others she suspected might be complicit in ignoring the negative undercurrents. She began by recounting her undercover experiences, how she had witnessed employees intimidated, belittled, and harassed by Brian Cutter. She displayed some of the notes she had taken, detailing the repeated transgressions. The head of HR, a woman named Maria Santos, looked increasingly distraught as the presentation continued. I assure you, Miss Hawthorne, if any official complaints had reached my desk with such serious allegations, we would have acted, Maria insisted, but her voice trembled, suggesting she was aware there were failings in her department's processes. Renee gently but firmly responded, "I believe you, Maria. Unfortunately, we have discovered that mid-level HR personnel, likely in cahoots with unscrupulous managers, suppressed or misfiled complaints. The system we trusted to protect employees was compromised from within. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats." The corporate counsel frowned, scanning the documents. "This could expose us to substantial liability," he said quietly. "If employees pursue legal action and we don't have documented follow-through, it could get expensive, and more importantly, it's a moral failure." Renee nodded. "The moral failure is paramount to me. We will fully rectify this. We will not hide from accountability. We will do what it takes to make this right." She outlined her plan. Immediate investigation. A new, independent oversight committee would be formed, reporting directly to her. They would audit HR files, interview employees, and ensure that all complaints were handled properly. Leadership overhaul. Any manager found guilty of consistent harassment or discrimination through the new committee's findings would be immediately terminated. This included those who used intimidation tactics or had discriminatory practices. Restorative measures for employees. Those who had been forced out or had left due to toxic environments would be contacted. Where possible, Avalon would offer restitution or even re-employment, ensuring they felt valued. Communication and training. A new wave of training programs focusing on diversity, inclusion, and leadership best practices would be mandatory for all management levels. The executives exchanged glances. Some, like the VP of Operations, seemed relieved that the CEO herself was taking charge to correct the course. Others, especially those who had previously neglected rumors, wore shame in their expressions. Renee narrowed her eyes. "We will not let this define Avalon," she stated. "We will demonstrate that accountability is real here. I want daily updates. If you see any sign of retaliation against employees who speak up, handle it immediately or you answer to me." The meeting adjourned with a shaken but resolute sense of purpose. As the executives filtered out, Maria Santos stayed behind, hesitating near the doorway. "Miss Hawthorne," she said, voice soft, I'm sorry. I'm sorry we let you down, that we let the employees down. It's no excuse, but we've grown so big, so fast. Some processes slipped through the cracks, and apparently, some managers used that to their advantage. Renee took a breath, then offered Maria a measured nod. We can't change the past, but we can change the future. We need to do better, and that starts now. I'm counting on you to restore faith. In HR, Maria's eyes flashed with determination. She nodded firmly. I won't let you down again. While the official channels roared into action, the news of Brian's public firing spread like wildfire across Avalon Technologies. Word reached other departments by the end of the day, and employees who had felt similarly oppressed by tyrannical managers found renewed hope. Some emailed the CEO directly, sharing horror stories of being passed over for promotions due to race or gender, or having their concerns about harassment dismissed. Renee read them one by one, heart-heavy but resolute. The outpouring validated her undercover mission. The illusions of a perfect workplace were shattered, but truth was stepping into the light. Meanwhile, for Brian, a swift and painful karma unfolded. He faced not only the loss of a lucrative position, but also potential legal consequences if employees filed discrimination suits with him named personally. Word on the street was that his references at Avalon would reflect his misconduct, effectively blacklisting him from similar positions in top-tier firms. He might blame the system or claim he was misunderstood, but the facts were indisputable. There was no escaping the consequences of his actions. In the days that followed, a series of departmental shifts occurred. Some managers quietly resigned, likely sensing the new wave of oversight and preferring to slip away before they could be investigated. Others stepped up, pledging their support to the CEO's renewed vision. Team leads were briefed that the era of intimidation was over. Avalon was returning to its roots, a place where employees, no matter their background, were empowered to excel. Karma, indeed, hit hard, not just for Brian, but for any who had indulged in power plays at the expense of fairness. Yet, in the same sweep, a new dawn of accountability gripped the halls of Avalon Technologies, one that rekindled the embers of hope and possibility in every cubicle and conference room. In the following weeks, Renee got busier than she had been in years. She personally interviewed employees who had endured or witnessed toxic behavior. She visited departments in casual attire, no longer fully undercover, but approachable and down to earth. She wanted her people to feel safe, opening up to her. Janelle and Ricardo, the two new hires who had witnessed the dramatic unveiling, were invited to a follow-up session with the new oversight committee. They each shared examples of how Brian had repeatedly disrespected them, from minor slights to direct threats. They recounted how he singled out employees he believed were weak links, many of them belonging to underrepresented groups. The committee documented every detail, promising swift redress. On a Friday afternoon, Avalon sent out a company-wide memo from the CEO's office. In it, Renee addressed the situation candidly. Dear Avalon team, recent events have underscored that we have room to grow in living up to our core principles of innovation, diversity, and integrity. Some of our colleagues have faced unacceptable treatment. This is our moment to reaffirm who we truly are. We will address the wrongdoing and ensure justice for those affected. We will strengthen our systems so no future complaint goes unheard. We commit to building a workplace where every voice matters. Together, we will create an environment worthy of Avalon's name. Sincerely, Renee Hawthorne, founder and CEO. The memo triggered an avalanche of positive responses. Many employees reached out to express relief that the company was taking such an honest stance. Some praised Renee for her undercover approach, saying it felt good that the CEO cared enough to see the truth personally, though many admitted they never expected such a twist. A broad campaign to restore trust followed. New training sessions on unconscious bias, respectful communication, and leadership accountability rolled out for all managers. Each session included real stories from employees anonymized for safety to highlight the harm of toxic behavior. The HR department was overhauled, with new checks and balances to prevent complaint suppression. Maria Santos led the charge, ensuring that everyone on her team understood the stakes and the renewed emphasis on employee well-being. Renee also took steps to maintain the momentum of these changes. She formed a permanent culture council composed of employees from various departments, seniority levels, and backgrounds. Their mission: to regularly report on the state of company culture, host inclusive events, and keep a direct line to the CEO's office. The council members, initially nervous, realized this was a genuine opportunity to shape Avalon's environment. They embraced the responsibility with enthusiasm, brainstorming ways to maintain open communication and highlight success stories. Beyond the internal reforms, the public soon caught wind of the story rumors circulated that the CEO of Avalon had gone undercover to confront workplace discrimination. Journalists clamored for interviews, intrigued by the dramatic showdown. But Renee, while acknowledging the truth of her infiltration, politely declined sensationalist angles. She released a measured statement, emphasizing the importance of a fair workplace and the willingness of Avalon to own up to its shortcomings. The press largely applauded her as a dynamic leader who practiced what she preached. Most importantly, morale among everyday employees soared. In the cafeteria, laughter slowly replaced hushed anxiety. Cubicles no longer felt like prisons. People swapped stories of gratitude, saying they never expected top leadership to take such hands-on steps. Turnover dropped, and productivity actually increased, an indicator that a positive environment fuels better performance. Janelle, for one, settled comfortably into her role. With Brian gone, she no longer felt a target on her back. She devoted herself to her tasks, and when her mother's health took a turn for the worse, Janelle applied for compassionate leave. This time, HR processed it swiftly, granting her the time and support she needed. When she returned, she found her job intact and her workload covered by empathetic co-workers. She was, in a word, valued. Ricardo, relieved of intimidation tactics, unearthed some revolutionary data analysis methods that he had been afraid to share under Brian. After presenting them to a more open-minded manager, he was fast-tracked to a special projects team, showcasing the sort of brilliance that Avalon was meant to nurture. Indeed, a new dawn had broken over Avalon Technologies. Employees walked the halls with renewed pride, determined to ensure that this time, the culture of respect, inclusion, and growth would genuinely flourish. Not as a lofty statement on a plaque, but as a living, breathing reality in every corner of the company. And as for Renee, she found a new purpose in daily interactions with her employees. She spent time mentoring young talents, hosting Q&A sessions, and casually dropping by break rooms to chat. She refused to let the halo of the corner office distance her from the real heartbeats of Avalon, the people. If any whisper of toxicity arose, she wanted to hear it immediately. She intended to keep Avalon on track, as the inclusive powerhouse she'd always dreamed it could be. Change demands courage, and sometimes that courage must flow from the very top. In this story, a determined CEO went undercover to safeguard her own vision, unearthing the dark secrets that threatened her company's core. Through honesty, accountability, and swift justice, she not only weeded out the toxic elements, but also reignited hope among employees who had long felt voiceless. The powerful lesson? Leadership is more than a title. It's a calling to protect, empower, and uplift those we serve. If this tale of courage and redemption resonates with you, show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who value equality and integrity, and subscribe to stay connected. Here on our channel, we bring you stories that remind us of the power of doing what's right, even in the face of adversity. Join us, and together, let's champion a more inclusive and empathetic world.